Well, we've got trains that run, and at least one industry ready to receive some covered hoppers. Well, I'll show you all this progress and much more coming up on this layout update on the main track. Well, hey friends, welcome here to the main track. My name is Mike, and it's great to have you on board today. Hope you've been having an awesome summer. Of course, we're talking about August 2024 being the summer, and it's been a very busy one here. I've been to a lot of great train shows and events over the last few months, in addition to working on my own layout. Of course, I brought you some of those layout tours and highlights of some of those shows in our recent episodes. I wanted to say a big thank you to everybody who came up and said hi at the most recent train show I was at. That was the Turkey Creek NMRA Division show in Shawnee, Kansas, right outside of Kansas City. Had a lot of great vendors out there that I got to visit with, some really neat layouts set up, and I also really enjoyed the home layout tours after that. So I've spent a lot of time touring other people's layouts and bringing you highlights of those this summer, but I figured it was a pretty good time to touch bases with you and show you some of the progress I've been making here on my HO scale Sedalia subdivision layout. I've had a lot of you asking how things are coming along, and I have been busy down here, so I'm pretty excited to show you what I've been doing here in the last few weeks. Now, in some of my previous episodes, I've kind of explained that I'm doing things a little differently here with the construction of my layout. It's pretty typical for most people to build all of the bench work first and then go back and do the track work and then the scenery, etc. Because of a unique situation here in my train room in my basement, I'm having to do things a little out of order and certainly a little unconventional. I've had a problem with my flooring here in the basement. In one of my previous episodes, I showed you how I tore out the walls in the basement. But in the areas that were carpeted, the floor has been uneven. And so I'm having to find some kind of a fix for my flooring. It's not going to be very cheap. Until I'm able to find a solution for the flooring, I'm simply focusing on the around the walls portion of the layout. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been spending my time getting the bench work done, getting the track work done on the portions of the room around the walls that I'm able to complete. Starting right here, you can see I have the bench work done, and this is where my power plant is going to be. I featured this in some of the most recent episodes. It's the Kansas City Power and Light Plant in Ladue, Missouri. It was one of the main customers of the KD. In fact, the largest customer of the MKT in Missouri, getting unit coal trains, a very busy place. And so this is certainly a structure, a facility that I couldn't do without here on my layout. What you can see here is a big open space, but I have constructed this Walther's conveyor kit. Now, the conveyors that I'll eventually be building are going to be more prototypical. I will, in the future, do better versions of those. But for now, the Walther's conveyor kit looks pretty close to what I need, and it gives me pretty good measurements for that. So I've gone ahead and constructed that, put that in place, and that way I can see what I'm working with space, where I need to put my tracks for my unloading area, etc. So that's going to be that right there for now. That will be the fill-in until I can go back, like I said, in the future and make something a little bit nicer. Now, as you can see right here, I also have quite a bit of track laid down. I have the main line installed. I have that glued down. I have everything wired, so I'm able to move my trains back and forth, which gives me kind of a break from the construction here, getting to do a little bit of operations. And with this, I have the main line down. I also have a passing siding down. There was a major passing siding here in Ladue. And so this will give me a chance to have meets here in Ladue between trains when I get everything running and have operation sessions. It also serves as the spot for the branch line to the power plant to break off. You can see I have a train here on the siding. I have the Walther's SW7, which I reviewed and talked about several times in recent videos. I've also got some Missouri Pacific hopper cars right here on the siding, just kind of giving me a little bit of an example of what things are going to look like when I have these unit coal trains here. So looking forward to that. And what you see here is one of my newest locomotives on the roster. This is a Rapido GP38 in the Conrail scheme, and I was able to pick those up pretty quickly after they came out just earlier this week. You might be asking me, why do I have a Conrail unit on my KD layout? If you've watched some of my previous episodes, I've kind of explained that. Back in the mid to late 1980s, the KD had a bunch of former Conrail units that it was operating. And so instead of spending the money to repaint them green and yellow, they kept them mostly in this blue Conrail scheme and simply did some patch outs. Now, I had some original Atlas GP38s and GP40s. Those were great locomotives. I had a great time patching those up, weathering those, but I wanted the challenge of doing that again with these Rapido locomotives, and so this is one of two that I have obtained right here, and I do plan on doing a review of those coming very soon, and I'll walk you through the steps of patching these up and weathering those as well. Moving along here, you can see I've weathered some of the track already in this small segment. I'm nowhere near done, but I was able to get the preliminary weathering on this done. What I do is I use a technique that a lot of guys have been using and that I've seen a lot of people on YouTube utilizing. Now, what that entails is Rust-Oleum's camouflage spray paint. People can use that to paint boats I've seen or whatever. You can usually get it in your hardware store, even at Walmart and Target and places like that. Just a very simple brown color. It's matte, and so what I've done is I've taken that, sprayed the track down, and I used the same technique on my previous layout. Now, the rails are brown, but that also gets the ties brown. So once I have this sprayed down, what I do is I go back and I simply repaint every individual tie. And so that will pop out with a different color right there. I will, of course, go in and ballast the track and weather that when I get to that point. Coming up here now is the town of Ladue, a very tiny village in Henry County, Missouri. Not much more than a ghost town nowadays. Back during the days of the Katy, there was a master mix grain elevator. In fact, if you have a copy of my book, Show Me Katy, you can see this photograph by Rick Morgan, which shows a Katy local serving that grain elevator. I believe that was sometime in the late 1970s. But this scene did not change very much from the 70s through the 80s. And in fact, when I remember seeing Ladue in this grain elevator in the late 1980s, it looked pretty much identical to this. And so this is what I've done. I've taken a Walthers kit and really hacked it up, doing a kit bashing job here. This was originally the Valley Growers Association grain elevator by Walthers. I had to do a lot of cutting. There are not a lot of pictures of this grain elevator, so I was able to find just a couple of those and use my memory. I didn't get any pictures of it when I was a youngster, when it was in place. That happens a lot of times. We think a structure is always going to be there, and we don't get pictures of it, and then it gets torn down, and we wish we had that imagery. So I was able to get just enough details to do an approximation on that, and so that is what this is. In the future, if I can find some additional pictures or even better yet measurements, I will go back and do a more accurate representation of this grain elevator. But looking at the final product here, I think I did a pretty good job of at least capturing the feel and the look of the grain elevator. I also have the Highway T grade crossing. This was a county route in Ladue, crossing the two tracks of the Katy right here. And right now I have a couple of Rick's products, highway sections in place, just showing the spacing of it. This will allow me to do some planning work on that, and I will eventually go back and do an asphalt street to represent the actual prototype road through there. I do have the signals already in place right here. Now, these are some signals that I had in my previous layout. They're by We Honest, a company from China. I did a couple of reviews on these signals in those previous episodes, if you want to take a look back at those. Very cheap, pretty close to prototypical. They're not exact. I've had some people make comments on the channel saying they're a little too large. I've done some measurements of these signals and then gone and taken some measurements of prototype signals. These are indeed a little too large, but only by about 6 inches on each side. For instance, the crossbucks right here, a total of 1 foot, but on each end of these blades on the crossbuck, they're only about 6 inches too large. You can look at these with your eyes and probably tell that they're a little too big, but for, I believe it was $5 per signal that I paid for these. They're pretty cheap, and I do plan on doing some upgrades with some nicer crossbucks on these. I do have these signals, as I mentioned, wired up with the sensors, so as I'm running my trains back and forth, they do activate the signals, and so that's the beginning of the wiring of many grade crossings and signals that I do plan on having here on the layout. Moving along a little bit behind the grain elevator, this is another one of these Rapido GP38s. This is a Burlington Northern unit. I do like the Burlington Northern as well. I call it the other green railroad. I saw Burlington Northern trains quite a bit while I was growing up, and it's actually prototypical to have Burlington Northern units here on the Katy. They had a lot of run-through power on those coal trains coming up here to Ladue and running in other parts of the Katy system, so it was very common to see BN power, and so I do like the BN, and I have a complete valid reason to have some BN power here on the layout, and I look forward to running those locomotives as well and having those as part of my engine roster. And behind the Rapido unit are a couple of my Athearn Genesis MKT units. One of those is the GP38-2, and the other is the GP39-2. So certainly nice additions to my MKT roster that I have here on the layout. And now we come to a unique situation. It's an obvious gap in the layout, and that's because I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to fill the gap. You see right here, the layout is going to cross an area where I have double doors going outside. Now, these doors are going to be really nice because they're going to allow people to come into the layout room from outside. So I can't block these off completely. I don't want to block them off, obviously for access reasons, but also it's really nice having sunlight down here, especially on those dark and gloomy winter days. I really like sunlight. And so with this basement, it's actually a walkout basement, so I do have windows on two sides. I'll have to cover up a little bit of them for a little bit of the space across there, but I want to keep as much open as I can to let that light in. And so what I'm going to do right here is create a drop down section. I know some guys have lift up sections or other areas where you can duck under. I don't want to have to duck under anything. Those are inconvenient. I know a lot of guys have duck unders because they have to, and depending upon what your situation is, that may be inevitable. But for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a drop down section. I don't have enough ceiling clearance to have an area that lifts up. And so I'm going to put this section right here on hinges. It will drop down when I need to get in and out of the door and connect that back. So should be a very interesting project. I've taken a lot of notes on other people's access hatches on their layouts, and I'm trying to combine some of those ideas to come up with my final solution here. So that's certainly going to be a big project, and I imagine quite a bit of content for an episode coming up here on the main track. Heading down the wall right here, I just have some more bench work done. This is just very roughed in right here for the most part. I have it up on the wall. You can see the height, but I don't have any of the foam down or anything else like that. I'm at least able to stand back and see exactly how long the layout's going to be and what it's going to look like for the most part when things are completed. And around here, the layout's going to take a curve, and I am coming to some more windows right here. Now, I will have the layout going across these windows right here, but I'm not going to cover up the whole thing. On other parts of the layout, I have pretty tall backdrops. Right here, I'm thinking the backdrop will be about 1 foot tall. That way I can still have plenty of sunlight coming in on the top and below that, and still able to cross these windows here to get to the other parts of the layout. And then things kind of end around this wall, and the next segment going beyond that will be a very large scene depicting Truman Lake. I featured that in some of my other videos. One of the larger bridges on the Katy system, and definitely here in Missouri. So that's going to be quite a project. That'll be around the corner, and plenty of stuff to talk about in future episodes. And as you can see, that's what I have done so far, and I think I've made pretty good progress. I've been here in my new house for about 9 months now. When you take away all the construction time that I've had to do on the room right here, I think I've made some pretty decent headway right here. But of course, there's no rush. I obviously have days that are more productive than others, and it seems like I have weeks where I get more done than other weeks. But of course, I'm going to take my time and enjoy every step of the way. Hey, speaking of train shows, we got several more coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at some of those. This coming September 2024, I'm going to be at the Ozarks Model Railroad Association show in Springfield, Missouri. That's going to be on September the 20th and 21st. I'm going to be there to say hi to everybody, and I'm also going to be having a small module set up with some structures from right here on the HO scale Sedalia subdivision layout. So if you're in Missouri, in the Springfield area, toward the end of September of 2024, we'd love to see you there once again for the OMRA show. So between train shows and my own layout down here, I certainly have plenty to keep me busy in the coming months. And as always, I appreciate you guys tuning in and coming along for this journey as I construct the MKT Sedalia subdivision layout. I'll look forward to seeing you next time right here on the main track. Bye-bye.